Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Perspective right here on the CryptoCast Network. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much again for joining us. We have lots to talk about, a lot of great crypto information. As always on the show Perspective, we like to interview authors in the space about their amazing articles. But before we get into that, we are screen sharing the website here, the CryptoCast.network website, where you will find all of our links like the YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, iTunes, and RSS. So if you guys prefer to listen to the audio stream, you can do that as well. Of course, we're sharing our merchandise here as well, so you guys can, if you guys want to check that out to support the show. And then we are sharing our QR code for donations, as this is a community supported YouTube channel, and we just very much appreciate all the donations that you guys give us and all the feedback that we get. And also, we really appreciate if you guys, if you are new to the channel, to please hit that subscribe button. And then if you guys are liking the show, please hit that thumbs up. And then if you are an audio listener, we would really appreciate a review in iTunes. We got a few in there right now, and we really appreciate all the feedback, guys. So with that aside, let's go ahead and stop the screen share real quick and introduce our special guest for today, Mr. David Hedqvist, economist at Bitcoin.se. David, how are you doing today?
Hi, thank you. I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, very, very well. Thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate it. We got lots to talk about. Yet another amazing article that I see. I've seen seen a couple of your articles, but this one is really great. And I think it's important for the space to understand and start thinking about. So I want to get into that. But before we do that, David, maybe you could just introduce yourself to the audience a little bit. Give us a little 1-minute spiel about you, and then we'll get more into the article.
Sure. So I'm David, and I got interested in Bitcoin way back in 2011. Spent the fall of 2011 just reading about Bitcoin, trying to understand it. I have a background in computer science as a programmer, so I got kind of interested in the technical side of it, but also having an interest in the concept and the theories of money. Those two things sort of resonated, and I get really interested. So beginning of 2012, I started Bitcoin.se as just a blog in Swedish, where I sort of shared what I learned and shared some news. And I've been having that as sort of a side project since then. There were a few years that I was sort of out of the loop, but recently I've gotten more into it again and redesigned the site, and then a bit more active again. So yeah.
The site is beautiful, I got to say. Absolutely, it's beautiful. I'm a web developer myself and web designer, so I can tell you that, yeah, it is absolutely nice, top notch. Looks beautiful in all resolutions. I like it, man. I really like the menu. So great site, a lot of good information. Now, you guys have information about hardware wallets. I mean, it really is kind of like the bitcoin.org almost for Sweden, but man, this is like on another level of information, all sorts of great information. So, and it looks like, it sounds like you said you got into the Bitcoin in around 2011. So I think that predates most of us here. For sure, definitely me. I didn't get in until the late 2012 and didn't really start even caring about it really till 2013. So really great to see another early Bitcoiner, man. You've seen some things. You've seen some things and some stuff. So interesting stuff. Very cool. So before we get into the article, so the name of this article here is called "Why Bitcoin Shouldn't Be Compared to Companies or Payment Systems." And so before we get into the article itself, David, maybe you can just tell us why you wrote this article, why you felt that you need to write this article and share it with the community.
Yes, I think it was triggered by this interview that I link in the article with this former CEO of PayPal. He's obviously not very bullish on Bitcoin, but one of the things that he says is something like Bitcoin makes no revenue, has no profitability, and he speaks in these terms as if it was a company. And that sort of triggered me, and then I started looking up some older articles where, for example, you have one where the headline is that Bitcoin is now bigger than PayPal. It's the same kind of thing where you take the market cap of Bitcoin and compare it to a company, and that's sort of why I start the article by reasoning a bit about this market cap measure and what it really means when it comes to money compared to companies.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So real quick, I am getting some audio feedback a little bit. If maybe you could like adjust your mic a little bit, or double check that you have a good connection. Because we in the beginning of the show, pre-show, we definitely, I didn't notice any audio issues, but just a quick double check on that if you can. It's just a little bit of audio feedback, or maybe you might maybe you can even try disconnecting and reconnecting real quick. But so that makes a lot of sense, though, David, being able to see this problem that you've seen in the space, and being able to actually write about this. This is really interesting because a lot of people don't have the background to write on this, but this is great that you did. You saw this issue of this article trying to tell people that Bitcoin is like a company, when of course we all, at least a lot of the people that have been around Bitcoin as long as you and I have, we know that Bitcoin is not a company, and in fact should not, not be treated as a company. And that is the basis for this article. There's a lot of great information. So let's go ahead and start then, just right at the top. Then right at the intro. I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, I talk about how this coin market cap site is obviously very popular now, and it's kind of the standard way to measure the value of something like Bitcoin is to look at this list and see the market cap. But so what that really means is that you measure the amount of money basically, and nobody really did that before cryptocurrencies, and we never really talked about what the total amount of money out there, and definitely not about how that compares to companies. So, and it's not even very clear how you should measure this if you want to do it. So I think if you want to measure like the market cap of Bitcoin, you can use it to compare Bitcoin to for example, gold. Then it makes sort of sense by comparing it to like the market cap of PayPal. It doesn't really make sense at all. So I talk a little bit here in the article about money supply, different measures of money supply. So really, Bitcoin at its core is like a monetary base. So it's similar to like the monetary base of dollars, and you would look at what's the amount of that and how does that compare to other things. And I link here to this, I think maybe a bit further down to this page called All of the World's Money and Markets in One Visualization. And there you can see like what's the size of the biggest companies like Apple, and what's the size of the total amount of gold, or the amount of like currency or money. And so, for example, you see that the market cap of the biggest companies is like 800 billion, and the market cap of gold is like 7 trillion. How do we compare those? It doesn't really make much sense to try to do it at all. So I think that's sort of my first point here.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see all of those. For the audio listeners, we are sharing, this website that shows all of the world's money, comparing them, and it's really interesting. You say you have all these companies and you have all these currencies, and there are completely different things. In the real world, you don't compare such things. We just look at. You can't just look at a market cap of something. So that is really, really interesting. You say here, the term market cap has traditionally been used for the total value of all outstanding shares of a company. And, before Bitcoin, right, nobody except nerdy economists talked about the total value of a currency anyway. And so that is really interesting, that we're now all starting to talk about, Bitcoin is bringing this into the awareness of the people, bringing the idea of what is money to the mainstream. Like we're actually going to have regular mainstream people start asking, what is money? And that is great. We're getting more and more people asking questions like, why, what is the Federal Reserve? Why is the Federal Reserve a private company? Why is money, for the most part been private? Why can't we have this more open choice of currency? So that just asking those questions, if Bitcoin only got us to do that, it would be a pretty amazing feat, right? So if Bitcoin is getting people to ask these types of questions, and going to these conferences, I can see like these regular people, just at HoshaCon conference, and you can see all these just regular, 20s, all these millennials and all these regulars, 20, 30 people just, just talking about how crypto has allowed them freedom that they haven't ever thought possible. and that's just really, really great to see that they're even, sort of thinking about the freedom of money. So really great to hear. And this is again another really interesting point about the fact that strictly speaking, there really is only roughly 17 million coins in existence, and it really should be the monetary base. You say, right?
Yeah, so that's the most straightforward comparison to make. But also, Bitcoin is, I mean, it is Bitcoin is very different from money that we've been using before. So it's not exactly clear that that's the comparison we should make either. Because
maybe you could tell us too real quick, like what M1 means, and and the various types of money like that.
yeah, so basically M0 or monetary base, you have different definitions in different countries, but basically that's the central bank money. So it's coins and bills, but also like digital versions of central bank money, like accounts that banks have at the central bank. So that you can call that the monetary base, but then money that we normally use is in bank accounts on regular banks. And so M1, that's all of those checking accounts and bills and coins. So it's more of a measure of the stuff that regular people normally use as money. And so as it is now, regular people have access to central bank money through bills and coins, but not the digital versions of it. So most of the money that we use is actually not central bank money. It's bank money, and that's included in M1. So Bitcoin kind of makes this monetary base available to the public in a different way than our current money is. So that's why I read maybe we can't actually compare it to the monetary base, because maybe it will function differently. So maybe it's more comparable than to M1, which is the kind of money that regular people use.
Very interesting. And of course, Bitcoin itself. Well, and of course, Bitcoin itself, is sort of meant to be a layered approach as well, right? Like all monies, like all networks, like all computer science, pretty much everything is layered, right? Especially when it comes to distributed systems and networks. So maybe it would be like Lightning is more like the M1, and the the layer 1 chain is more like the base layer. Does that make more sense? Like the monetary base layer.
Yeah, so those are sort of new concepts too, like the Lightning Network, and that's why it's so hard to. And I think that's sort of a big reason too for the misunderstandings about Bitcoin. It is a completely new kind of money, and people aren't used to even thinking about that. So I mean, if we're moving on in the article here,
that's great. That's great. We can move on to the next point here.
Yeah, so I think that what this former PayPal CEO does here is that he's comparing Bitcoin mostly to PayPal. So he's seeing it as a payment system basically, and so he's comparing it to PayPal. And it's fair, you can do that, but that's only like a small part of what Bitcoin really is. And I mean, over the years since I got into this, in the beginning, there was a lot of talk of Bitcoin as, like in Satoshi's papers, as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So there was a lot of belief, I think, that Bitcoin would sort of replace Visa and MasterCard and be used for payments. But then over the years, it kind of changed, and now people focus more on this unique features that Bitcoin bring as a currency, like that it's decentralized, it's not controlled by anyone, it's censorship resistance, and it's a truly scarce resource, and so on. So it's not, I mean, Bitcoin's unique selling point is not that it's a good payment system, and it's kind of hard to sell it that way to like consumers, especially in countries like rich countries that have well-functioning payment systems. It's hard to convince my friends to use Bitcoin to pay for and so on, even with Lightning Network there, because there are very few like pros compared to what they use today. So I think it's more important to focus on these basic properties of Bitcoin as a currency, as a store of value. And it has been shifting towards that over the years. And maybe it can be both. I mean, with Lightning Network now, maybe it can be both, but its uniqueness of Bitcoin is it's not in the payment system part of it. And so, I mean, this Bill Harris here compares it to PayPal, and he talks about transactions per second and so on, and that's sort of his approach to it. But then he also goes into these other properties. So he also talks about that we have currencies. We already have the dollar and the yen and so on. So he sort of confuses these functions. And I think that if we want to talk about Bitcoin, it probably makes sense to split these things, to talk about it as a payment system and to talk about it as currency, as a store of value, to separate those things, because it's very different things. When you confuse them, it's hard to sort of talk about. So,
and it's easy to get confused, right? I mean, Bitcoin is a very complex thing, and most people just don't understand it as a whole because there's so many moving parts. It combines so many disciplines, you know, cryptography, mathematics, computer science, distributed systems. It's just absolutely fascinating when you take all those things together. So it makes sense, of course, that everybody is going to understand it in their own way. So we have like economists understanding it like this and applying theses to it, right? And then we have regulators understanding it like this as a money or a commodity. And everybody tries to fit Bitcoin into, you know, their own understanding, but it's really, really difficult when you do that. What I try to tell people is that, look, you know, nobody actually knows what Bitcoin is yet. It's just too early, and it continues to evolve. So we originally, of course, thought it was more like a, you know, micropayment system, right? But remember, there are a few people there, especially the developers, that understood what Bitcoin was from the beginning. You know, like Satoshi. I mean, there are some people that understood what Bitcoin was, specifically core developers from the beginning, and Bitcoin, you know, again, started out as people thinking that it was more of this microtransaction network, this payment network. But then we realized that, oh, block space is pretty scarce because, you know, there's only, we want to keep this thing decentralized. If we want to keep this thing decentralized, then we have to keep the block space very valuable and very scarce in order to facilitate everybody running their own node to be able to validate their own transactions, which of course is something very, very important in Austrian economic speakingly, you know, to be able to actually be sovereign over your own money. So, and then we start to see it more talk about like a digital gold. Like I try to tell people nowadays, David, I actually try to say that it's like digital gold with a payment network attached, because it's so hard to explain Bitcoin because it's so many things, but that seems to work out okay. And to try to not treat it as an investment, but as almost like a savings account. So where you use your savings account on layer 1, and then if you want to start spending, well, then you can do Lightning on layer 2, and it's going to take a while to get there. You know, even Lightning, you know, it's going to take a while for companies to be able to adopt Lightning, integrate Lightning, and get users used to it. But it will happen because it's faster, better, cheaper, and it will happen because it's still Bitcoin. Bitcoin itself still provides, you still get all these benefits of Bitcoin itself. So, you know, Bitcoin always continues to evolve. We have to continue to evolve with it. We can't try to put Bitcoin in a box. That's just really important. We can't try to make Bitcoin just this one thing. We have to let it be. And that is the beautiful nature of open source, free open source development, is that we can continue to see it evolve with no central top-down authority, you know, controlling it, right? Saying that you have to be this or you have to be that. Bitcoin will be what Bitcoin will be, and it's just fascinating to watch it play out and evolve over these years, because, you know, Bitcoin is going to evolve into something else and something else, and it's absolutely great to see people continue to really add more and more utility to Bitcoin with more and more features and more ideas. For example, like Lightning Network, you know, like Schnorr signatures, like private confidential transactions. These things, we just keep pushing the limits of the technology, and that's just great to see. So just important to remember, guys, that, you know, if you think you understand Bitcoin, just give it a couple of years. It'll be something different, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this comparison with gold is really one of the best ones, because, I mean, it is like gold, but with some extra features. It's digital. It's you can transfer it globally very quickly, but also like So I think if you look at what the PayPal CEO here does, is he doesn't really buy that Bitcoin is a good payment system, and then we look at like the currency side of it. He doesn't buy that either, and I think that this is also hard to sell to people because people are not used to new kinds of money, basically, and we hardly understand how money works now. So we know that there is this dollar, but why is this piece of paper worth $5? I mean, we sort of trust that there is an authority there. That's the only way that most people can understand it, is that there must be some sort of authority there. And then when there comes a system that no one controls and say that, hey, this is money, then people don't really buy that. And it's understandable because we haven't seen anything like it before. But then when you compare it to gold, it sort of gets people thinking in the right direction, I think, because one of the comments that you always get early on is like, what is Bitcoin backed up by? What's backing Bitcoin? What gives it value, and so on? And then it's easy to just turn to gold and ask people, what gives gold its value? And then you can start thinking in these terms. Maybe you haven't really thought about that. Why is gold worth something? And it's the same reason that Bitcoin is worth something now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, because with people who are maybe a little bit more deeper into the crypto space, or maybe just a little bit more understanding of economics or computer science, I try to tell people that, look, the most important part of Bitcoin really is this invention of digital scarcity, and this digital scarcity being, facilitated by this fixed supply. This is something that we've never, ever had. In addition, of course, to being able to send value instantly from peer to peer from anybody in the planet, that obviously is the big win. That's the real invention. But also on top of that, we have this digital scarcity. So it's not only the ability to do that, but the ability to do that with a sound money. And, as Trace Mayer likes to say, there's really only two truly scarce things in this universe, and that is time and Bitcoin. Everything else can just be created or found, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's that's a good point to try to drive home. Yeah,
maybe you could talk a little bit about let's see here, the next part about Visa. About all these some of these comments on Visa.
Yeah, so that's what he sort of was. It's sort of where he confuses things, is that he tries to compare it to Visa, and I think that it's obviously not fair, and you only count the number of transactions. I mean, I watched this talk by Nick Carter on the Honey Badger conference recently, where he had a nice graph showing the transaction volume instead. So, and he said that Bitcoin is not the parcels; it's the container. The size of transactions in Bitcoin is much larger, and the total amount of value that is moved, it's comparable to Visa, or at least it's getting closer. So it's again this thing that you're trying to compare it to something that it's not.
That's just a great point. Yeah, David, that's just a great point. Nick had that amazing talk at the Honey Badger conference where he did compare the size of these transactions, right, from Bitcoin to Visa. And what he found is that the size of the average size of a Bitcoin transaction was thousands of dollars, somewhere in the order of $3,000, and the average transaction on Visa was $100. And that's Bitcoin acting as a settlement layer. Like, that's acting as Bitcoin as it should. Like, it's the block space is valuable and scarce. The amount of Bitcoin is valuable and scarce. And so we see that people try to batch transactions, right? For example, that's a big part of what helped Bitcoin scale is these big exchanges and these big companies starting to batch their transactions. And now we see thousands and thousands and thousands of transactions, right? Batched together. And so that's just really, really great. That helps the whole space. That's a big reason why the fees are low right now. Also, of course, because of SegWit, and also, of course, because the network isn't being maliciously spammed as it was there for a few months last year. This so funny how some people still try to deny that, but you can go all look in the charts, look at all the charts, guys, look at the fees. It's just this big, big old spike. It's like nothing, right? And then just big old freaking spike V or upside down V, you know, going back down to nothing. And it's just hilarious. Like trying to tell me that's not artificial. Come on. And of course they like to use that narrative because they like to say, oh, the transactions, you know, were so expensive because so many people were using it. And now it's cheap because nobody's using Bitcoin. And of course that is not the case. It's there's a lot of people using Bitcoin. And of course, I think you'll agree here, David, that using Bitcoin also includes using it as a store of value, hodling.
Yes, exactly. And each one of those, so you can see it as a payment network, and you can see it more as like a base layer, a backbone of money, where it is used for payments, but large payments and fewer of them. Or you can watch it as just a store of value, like gold. So gold doesn't really move around a lot. Most of it is kept in vaults, just locked in. It's not moving at all, but it's still valued at like 10 times the market cap of Apple. So, so that's why I think it's good to like separate these things. We can talk about Bitcoin as a store of value, or we can talk about Bitcoin as a backbone for money transfers. Each of those have value. And the payment network for smaller transactions is not the big one. At least not right now. And we may get there with the Lightning Network, and then it's really huge because then Bitcoin is both this store of value, the backbone, and the system for the smaller payments, and that would be truly amazing. And then it's hard to see how on this interview, Bill Harris here doesn't see any usefulness of Bitcoin at all. Sort of that's sort of amazing.
People range the spectrum, David. They range the spectrum, right? All the way from completely useless, going to destroy the world's energy. You know, we're going to cause a huge global warming issue. All the way to, of course, people like us understanding that Bitcoin will most likely drive innovation and efficiency in alternative energy methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. And it's kind of polarized. I think that there is this sort of love or hate thing with Bitcoin, and well, it's interesting to think about why that is. And I think it has to do with this concept of money. People don't really believe you can introduce a whole new kind of money. We're so used to this government created money that we can't really imagine any other system, and we don't understand how the current system works. So why would someone just create some software, deploy it, and now we have new money? People don't really buy that, but the more you read about Bitcoin, and the more I think people will buy this.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we just get into the final part of the article, let me just ask a quick question. How do you see kind of Bitcoin playing out maybe with central banks? Do you see possibly Bitcoin becoming like the new sort of central bank, or like Bitcoin central banks where they can't actually create money, right? Of course, but they can provide other abilities. Do you see Bitcoin? So how do you see Bitcoin? How do you see central banks in a world where Bitcoin is successful in the next 10 years?
Well, I don't know if it's in the next 10 years, but
okay, how about 20? Let's give it 20.
Yes, so if Bitcoin really becomes this global standard, this global currency, where it's not only like a medium of exchange and a store of value, but where it's also the unit of account, where it is this global currency that people use, then central banks, they don't have a place anymore, really. I'm not sure if we will get there, but I think that it's a very interesting future to imagine. I mean, it's so now we have hundreds of different currencies, and the forex market, the market where I think I write about this at the end of the article, where you just trade currencies back and forth. This is the largest market in the world by trade volume. That's kind of absurd in a way. Why do we spend all these resources converting currencies back and forth? If you look at like how the internet took over the world, and how we now communicate globally everyone sees this as obvious. When we start to think the same way about money, then it doesn't really make sense to have all of these national, local currencies. So I think it's very interesting to imagine a future where we just have this one common standard for money. That
Yeah.
would be huge.
Yeah, very
But I don't
interesting.
know.
That's very interesting. That's great, really great points. You know, and it's interesting to think about because you know, when we all speak the same language, well, we can all work together better, right? So, you know, we see the planet converging on a single language, which is English. We see the planet converged on a single currency for the most part, which is of course the dollar. And this is not going to stop. It's the converging still continues. It's not going to be slowing or stopping anytime soon, especially now that we have an information age where we have a connected planet that's all literally connected 24/7, which means that we all are going to, when we find something like the dollar or like Bitcoin, we're all going to converge on it even faster. So that means I believe that the convergence will even be accelerated in this new sort of connected world. And I love the points about, you know, there really will be no need for a central bank or for fiat currencies. Now, everybody is, of course, going to try to create their own money and add a token to everything that they can try, because now that we can, that Pandora's box has been opened. And, you know, we're going to go through the growing pains of all of that. But at the end of the day, everybody will settle in the world's most secure liquid currency, right? Which is Bitcoin. And so it will seem to be acting like this world store of value. But it's going to be fascinating to see Bitcoin banks sort of pop up. And really, you can argue that exchanges are already kind of like Bitcoin banks for the most part. But it feels like there will be these Bitcoin banks in the future that were, so there's no need for central banks, but there will be Bitcoin banks that provide services. For example, you know, maybe some cold storage, maybe lending, maybe you know, all sorts of things that we can imagine. But there will always be people that need their handheld, right? So they'll provide some services that maybe for businesses and things like that that can help you out. I just don't see a need for anything for central banks. I don't see the need for regular banks for the most part, you know, other than just regular commercial banks providing Bitcoin services. But any comment on that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I agree. I think the banks do provide some services and will continue to do so, of course. And they may even do like fractional reserve with Bitcoin. It's possible.
But
But
we've already seen it with things like empty Gox. We've already seen exchanges. You know,
yeah,
not one
so
single exchange today actually has a proof of reserve for, you know, for us to all actually see. Even though that's cryptographically technically possible, they could, you know, give us an actual amount and or not an amount, but a cryptographic proof that we could prove against some type of address or something that we could see that they actually have, you know, the reserves that they say they have. And we're sort of still waiting for that. Peter Todd just real quick had a talk just recently at this conference. I forget the name of the conference over there right now, but Tone Vase is over there. Peter Todd is over there. Hackett. It's called Hackett, I believe.
mhm.
Peter Todd just spoke about that, saying that, look, not one single exchange has proof of reserves. They could all be lying. You know, you have no idea right now. And that is just an important point that the ecosystem has to be aware of, that hopefully we can freaking change that and provide and bring some more confidence to the ecosystem in the future.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, throughout history, there's always been this sort of thing where um, people store your gold and then they create paper instead, and you start trading the paper, and then you have more paper than gold, and so on. And um, this doesn't necessarily stop, but there's a big difference now in that regular people have access to this base layer. We don't need the alternatives in the same way that we did before, because we can actually transact directly with Bitcoin. So it changes the roles of many institutions, and I think that banks do provide a lot of different services now. So there's a place for them. They won't look the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very interesting to see. You know, remember in the beginning, of course, the all the ISPs, or sorry, all, you know, all the telephone and service providers were very, very, very scared of the internet coming. And of course, what happened to all those telephone providers and companies? Those telephone companies, they all became internet service providers. And so I believe a similar path will be on for Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies will play a similar role, have a similar path. Where right now, everything goes over these centralized rails, but eventually one day, everything will mostly be transacting over crypto because it is over the internet, which means it's cheaper, better, faster. So everything, the internet became the biggest library, it became the biggest mall, it became the biggest shopping store, it became the biggest this, the biggest entertainment, venue, the biggest this, the biggest that, the biggest this. Of course, one day it will be the world's biggest value transfer, the world's biggest stock exchange, right? The world's biggest bank, and on and on. So very interesting stuff. David, I'll let you go ahead and close out with these final points here of the article. Let's go ahead and finish this up. David, you seem to be muted. I don't hear anything from you. There was just a few final points that we were going to go over here, and we'll just wait to see if David can fix that. Nope. No audio yet, David. This is how we do it, ladies and gentlemen, live on the CryptoCast Network. If you want to go ahead and try that out, David, you can always plug in stuff, plug it back out. That always works as well. Or if you want to disconnect and reconnect, you can try that as well. But we just had the final points of the article to go, so it's not a big deal if we can't get you reconnected. But we hope we'll give you a minute to go ahead and try to do that. I can talk for a long time, guys. Nope, David can't hear you yet. Nope, nothing yet. You can try to disconnect and reconnect if you'd like, to see if that maybe will help something as well. Because we were actually having audio issues with you sort of this whole time, just a little bit where the audio seemed a little bit robotic. So maybe you can try plugging out, plugging back in. Nope, can't hear you yet. Yeah, no problem. We'll let you disconnect, reconnect, try that again real quick. And if we can't get you back, it's okay, David. We'll definitely, I'll definitely share out your information and everything like that. But we really, really appreciate you coming on, David. Just I'll just go into maybe some of these final points while you work on that, and then I'll let you know if I can hear you. But basically, just some of these final points, guys, was of this great article by David. Some of these final points of just Bitcoin's #1 selling point, is really its usefulness, its utility as a currency, as so many things, as a currency, as a payment network. It's really, really, really great. We'll see if we can see if David has anything. See if David can get David back yet. Give us a test, David. Test 1, 2, 3. Oh, I can hear you. We can hear you. You're a little bit low. The volume's a little bit low. Maybe you can turn that up a little bit. The volume on your mic. And if not, I can turn you up too.
Okay, you try to turn me up then.
Okay, let me try to see if I can turn you up. All right, go ahead. Give me a test 1, 2, 3, David.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. You hear me?
All right, well, that'll have to do for now. So go ahead and finish us, close this. No problem, Dave. This is how we do it live, guys. So this is the CryptoCast Network. So I'll let you go ahead finish the article, Dave.
Yeah. So basically, the article is really trying to articulate that the main selling point of Bitcoin is in its usefulness as a currency, not as a payment system. And that's payment system part is nice too, but really unique parts of Bitcoin is in the currency part, in that anyone in the world can use it without asking for permission, and it's not controlled by anyone, any country, any corporation, and it's transparent, and as we talked about earlier, truly scarce resource. And I think that it's also interesting to compare it with how the internet sort of spread around the world. Because when we talk about the possible future of Bitcoin as a standard, as the one currency of the world, this won't happen by governments cooperating, trying to create a global currency. It didn't happen that way with the internet. It couldn't have happened that way with the internet. It happened through basically a network that anyone could connect to from anywhere. And that's how internet spread, and that's how it sort of revolutionized the world. And I think that's the way it has to happen with currency too. And Bitcoin is the first time that this is practically possible. So I think that's the main selling point of Bitcoin, and that's what I talk about at the end of this article.
Yep, absolutely great. It's just fun to, I love all the people in the space. They all come up with all these sayings. Like Nick Carter, I love what he says. He says, this is Bitcoin essentially had an immaculate conception, right? Like this very organic, grassroots, bottom up approach that just simply cannot be repeated again because of course, Bitcoin. Everybody understanding what blockchain and Bitcoin is now. Bitcoin was created with no value. It had no value. It was created as a pure experiment. So that's just a really big, really great thing you say here. Bitcoin is the best version of global and truly neutral money that we have seen so far. And a completely new kind of money is something very unusual, which is why experts, business, finance, or economists don't quite know what to make of it. And I guess we can leave it there today, David. We're all still exploring, what Bitcoin is. I hope that we get Bitcoin historians. I know that I love every single Bitcoin documentary I can get my hands on, and we hope that we'll have more and more of those in the future. So again, David, thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it. This was a great show, great informative stuff. Maybe you can tell everybody where we can find more information about you, David.
Yes, sure. So mainly you can go to my site at bitcoin.se, and you can also find me on Twitter. I think that the Twitter account is bitcoin.se. If you search for it, you'll find it. So yeah, feel free to contact me. And thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, David. Again, just so people, if they can't hear you quite well, I just want to remind them that you guys can find them at bitcoin.se. It's just a really great website for Sweden. And really, it's like a bitcoin.org almost for Sweden. It's got so much great information. It's even gotten way more information than bitcoin.org. So if you guys are in Sweden, go to bitcoin.se. Don't go to bitcoin.com, bitcoin.org, anything like that. We really are, this really is a great site, bitcoin.se. And we hope that you'll keep it up there. You even have information about SegWit and all that good stuff. So we hope that you'll keep that up there. And again, we appreciate you, Dave, for coming on the show. We're going to have a couple more shows this week still. Of course, we have our Q&A, crypto Q&A show tomorrow. I believe I have a perspective as well as that. And then we got a show on Friday. Then we got the Bitcoin News Show on Sunday. So we got some stuff coming out. Of course, we just released a Bitcoin Matters, a brand new Bitcoin Matters from Beautyon, which is a great episode about privacy. I recommend everybody check that out. And we've had a few perspectives and we've had a bunch of shows already this week, so make sure to check that out, guys. And we hope to keep bringing you guys more and more content. We really, really appreciate all the feedback. And again, guys, if you are new to the channel, please hit subscribe. If you guys like the show, please hit the thumbs up. And if you are an audio listener, please give us a review over there on iTunes. So until next time, guys, keep talking Bitcoin, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.